Anthony Fantano, The Needle Drop. You love him. You love him. You pretend you don't, but you friggin' love him. You adore him. You are waiting patiently for every bloody review. You love the man. And today, I'm going to show my appreciation too by putting out a tier list ranking all of Anthony Fantano's perfect albums. Does that sound fun? Well, I bet it does, because you friggin' love him. And you know why I know you love him? Because my most viewed video ever across all platforms, Instagram Reels, TikTok, YouTube Shorts, is a Fantano related video where I ranked all of his channel 10 out of 10s in order from worst to best. So you like me more when I'm talking about Fantano. You don't like me that much when I'm not, but if I'm talking about Fantano, you like me more. That's how much you bloody love the man. So shamelessly, I'm putting out another video that involves Anthony Fantano in it to get you guys to like me more. That's how hard it is out here, guys. It's hard out here. So today we're ranking all of his perfect albums that I have seen myself in other lists across the internet being mentioned as Fantano calling it a perfect album. I've seen videos of his where he's mentioned them. I've seen him kind of in passing say these albums are perfect. I've probably missed some. There may be some out there for all you nerds to be like, why didn't you include this one? You can go into the description, make the tier list yourself, and maybe add some extra ones that I missed off, or put in the comments the ones that I might have missed. These are just the ones I've seen documented in certain places of the internet that people have mentioned. There may be more. Let me know which ones that I haven't got in there in the comments. I'll tell you how I feel about that album if you really want to know. But for now, we've got 35, I think, albums, 34, 35 albums in this tier list that we're going to rank in a nice order. Let's go for it. The only order that these are listed in is alphabetical, so we are going to start with the Beastie Boys, the legends of hip-hop, the white boys of hip-hop, the original OGs of the white boy rapping. And yeah, it's pretty decent. This is a thing with this tier list you're going to notice, because for me personally, not all these albums are going to be perfect. They're not all going to be amazing, because I'm a different person to Fantano. We're different ages, we come from different backgrounds, and he has his own personal reasons why he loves an album and he calls it perfect. And I have my own reasons why I call my albums perfect, that I love and I adore. And we're just different people. So I'm not going to think all of them are amazing. However, I will say the quality of the albums overall, I would say, is pretty strong. So I'm not really going to be hating on many of them. But there's going to be some hot takes where I just think some albums are just decent. They're just okay. They're just pretty good. And I think the Beastie Boys, contextually, you kind of have to look back and think what they were doing in the 80s with how they were using sampling techniques. Because if I was born in like 1979 and I was like a young kid listening to this for the first time, and I liked hip-hop music, obviously, this would be an all-timer. Because hearing what they were doing at the time must have been absolutely wow, right? And in some ways, because of the context, you have to really list it as an all-timer because it's super impressive. But time passes and influential albums can be surpassed by albums that come after it. And I just think it's one of those examples where like what they were doing was super impressive, but unfortunately they were that influential that other artists kind of perfected what they were doing later on, really. And on top of that, I find some of the rapping quite corny. Like I just got to be honest. I think even back then, I'd have probably heard some of their bars and the way their voices kind of wail and still been a bit off-put by some of the songs. But there's some great tracks on here, don't get me wrong. And like I say, contextually, you just have to think about that, because in 2024, this album sounds different to what it did back then. And again, I wasn't around when it came out, so there are reasons as to why it doesn't rank as high for me. Björk, this is going to be one that's going to be hard to stomach for some people, because I love Björk. I've done a video on Björk already. I did a worst to best, and I've even been thinking recently of doing a top 10 songs. So if you do want to see that, let me know in the comments, because I will put that out there if you'd like to see it. And I will say my ranking was a couple of years ago, and I probably shift it around now, and for Sora hadn't come out, so the ranking would look different if I made it today than when I did him back in, 2021, 2022, I think it was. And this album would be a bit higher up, but I still think, in the grand scheme of her discography and the grand scheme of music, I just don't love it as much as other people do. I'm going to put very good, because it is very, very good, and it's glossy and it's stunning, and the production is just immaculate, and her vocals are probably the best of her career on this album. But there are just points on the album where the beauty kind of washes over me a little bit. I'm not quite as enamored with every song. It's still a stunner, though, and probably if I were really, thinking about it harder, it would be higher up. And I know this album for a lot of people is 100% an all-timer. I get it. But yeah, I just think for me, there's just something about it that just doesn't quite enamor me as much as I feel like it's supposed to do. And you're going to find with this tier list that lots of albums land in very good, because I can appreciate a lot of these albums for what they are, but they don't absolutely, completely blow me away. Pretty much similarly with Bob Dylan. Now, Bob Dylan is an artist where I think he is one of the greats in terms of songwriting, in terms of lyrics, in terms of just music generally. Him and Leonard Cohen of that era are just so, incredible, although Leonard Cohen isn't quite the same era as Dylan, obviously, but yeah, those two for me are just so untouchable, and it's hard to really critique them. And I liked this album for it going kind of more rockier and the bluesy rock stuff, and the track Like a Rolling Stone is amazing. But yeah, I think some of his other albums just click with me more. That's the only thing. I think I actually prefer the older albums than this one. Freewheeling Bob Dylan, where it's a bit more folky. It's got that harmonica that's just blaring in your ears. That sounds way out of mix, really. But it's got that charm to it. I feel like the writing's just slightly better on those albums too. Yeah, some fantastic stuff in his discography. Again, similarly with Björk, putting this higher up makes sense. But, it is what it is. Charles Mingus next. I will say some of these jazz albums that are popping up, I feel a little out of my depth talking about jazz. I've always felt a little block with jazz music, particularly on this channel. I find it quite hard to talk about. I kind of find it quite hard to describe. I find it quite hard to convey my feelings and emotions. It's one of those genres that you probably don't see pop up on this channel often for that reason. So I'm not really going to spend too much time on Mingus, but again, it's very good. Don't get me wrong. I think I prefer the more kind of structured beauty in my jazz. The kind of whimsy, the delicate vibes that you get from jazz music, rather than the more kind of in your face, kind of forward thinking, mesmerizing, whoa, jazz music, which by the way, it's still very good. So I'm not saying I don't like this, but if we're talking some of my all-time favorite jazz albums, I'm thinking of it's Herbie Hancock. I'm thinking of Sonny Rollins. I'm thinking of Sun Ra. Sun Ra's amazing. Alice Coltrane, Chick Corea. That kind of vibe of jazz hits me a little bit harder than this more kind of frantic, but probably more influential jazz, really. So yeah, I can again see why people would have this in all time, but it's really high up on the rated music charts as well. It's quite surprising to see so many young people of my age and younger. Well, I say I'm young, I'm pushing those years on, I'll tell you that. But people kind of my generation have such an appreciation for this, because rated music is full of Zoomers and alphas at this point. They're all teenagers on there nowadays, and yet they have such a bloody appreciation for this style of music. It's pretty cool, to be honest, because I feel like it's not made for that generation, but maybe it's just contextually, again, time passes and you just grow an appreciation, and albums that are a bit more ahead of their time just kind of resonate more with a new generation. So it's pretty cool to see such a love for this album nowadays. Anyway, I'm babbling on. Let's go to Bratz. Yeah, maybe basic and obvious to have this an excellent. I've seen such a backlash to this one. I've told you I already had a video out on the shorts not real music side of the internet, you know, TikTok, Instagram Reels. And god damn, like people like really flamed Fantano for giving this a 10, and like, how can you give this a 10 over this random hip-hop album, or this random album that's got sounds nothing like Brat, or people saying Brat is the pop version of the Money Store just because Fantano gave both of those albums a 10. And it's just like the opinions surrounding it are absolutely wild. Like I just don't know what is going on with the response to this album, but I think the people that appreciate it are the ones that are, you know, getting their voices heard more. But yeah, there is a bit of a backlash to this one. I just think it's fantastic. I think it's just Charlie. I've talked about this album a lot on this channel already, so I'm probably repeating myself, but Charlie just being her authentic self, being allowed to have the artistic license to do what she's wanted to do for so long, not really have that label kind of holding her back, like it did on Crash, like she spoke about as well, where she didn't really feel like it was her true self. And I said in the review for Crash, where I felt like she was holding back, I felt like it wasn't quite herself, even though there are some good songs on that album. It has a bit of a bad rep, but there were some good songs on it. But Brat is just like a night and day difference, man. I wouldn't quite call it, you know, an all-timer, and I think this year we've seen a few albums surpass it, but it's one of the best of 2024, and I think it will stand the test of time. I think the Brat Summer meme, I think the connection people have to all of that, I think that won't be forgotten, even though it feels a bit like a fad right now. I just think the music is good enough for us to move on a year or so and still feel the same way we felt about those songs as when it came out. So yeah, I truly stand by that one. I think it's going to age very nicely. Daft Punk Discovery. We didn't have to do this one, did we? I just don't want to say my opinion here because, again, I'm not saying I dislike really any of these albums. In fact, I don't think there's even one, but we will get to them if there is, if that I haven't noticed, but we'll see. But Daft Punk's Discovery has such a reputation, and I just have to get it out there and say I think it's good. But for me personally, in the world of electronic music, in the world of electronic dance music, I know they're super accessible and there's a reason why they're so popular, and their albums are good, I will keep stressing this, but I just think their reputation kind of exceeds the quality of the music a little bit. I just think there's better out there, and I think for the problems in their music for me personally lie in the fact that they tend to have one really good idea, they have one really catchy, really earwormy hook that is super enjoyable, and it's great for like a minute, maybe 2 minutes pushing it. But they hammer in that point and loop it over and over again and just keep shoving it in your face to the point where you're just, by the end of the song, like, okay, I've got the point now. This was catchy for a little bit, but by God, we have done this way too much and I'm just sick of it by the end. It's still enjoyable and I still appreciate what they're doing, but I just don't see how this is considered one of the best electronic albums ever. I just don't. I really don't. It's good. It's a good album. It has great songs on it. Digital Love, One More Time will always be tracks I hold closely. But yeah, I feel they just hammer in that point. And people have flamed me before for saying this, because I think I said it on Twitter or something. And people really came at me because they were like, oh, you don't get it. You're calling it repetitive. You don't get it. It's like, well, I get what they're doing. I'm just saying, personally, for me, it just gets a bit repetitive by the end. That's all I'm saying. Is there anything really wrong with that? That's how I feel. They're good, but yeah. I didn't really want to talk about this one, and I feel like it being here is pretty much... Oh, God, I don't want to put it in bad. I don't think it's bad, but yeah, it's very good, right? I know Fantano himself has spoke about this recently, or maybe not recently. I can't remember exactly when it was, right? But I'm sure he said somewhere in a video that the context, again, context means a lot. And when he reviewed this, we didn't know the information about this singer in the way that we know now. And I think he has even said himself that he doesn't view it as a 10 out of 10 anymore. So maybe it shouldn't really be on this tier list. But he has technically said in a full review and had it really high up on a year-end list. And he has called it perfect. So it is one that I feel a little weird talking about. Because honestly, there was a time where this was like one of my favourite albums of the year too. It really was fantastic. I had already been aware of Daughters, so I knew it before Fantano reviewed it. But not that that really matters. But I'm just saying, like, I had been a fan of their, what is it, their 2010 album, I think it was. I was already a fan of that. So I was highly anticipating this album at the time anyway. And I think their 2010 album is actually better than this one, to be honest with you. But yeah, just finding out that, you know, the singer isn't quite the person he seems, and a lot of the lyrics are actually kind of like manic and distasteful and messy for the reason that we learned, it just puts a sour taste in my mouth. I don't know where to rank it, honestly, because like I say, it was fantastic when it came out, but I haven't gone back to it since I learned that information. I just feel like hearing it again, knowing that and hearing the lyrics, I just think it may end up dropping really far down to something like meh. So based on memory, it was a very good album. But yeah, I feel a bit weird about the one. I'm sure you as a viewer can understand that I'm trying my best here because it's tricky. But yeah, let's just move on. Let me know how you feel about this album. If you have gone back to it recently as well, and if you have changed your mind in any kind of way. Because I did see, again, people say, well, you can't just change your mind. It's like, well, you can, because context is everything. Those lyrics have a totally new meaning, knowing that the singer is abusive. So yeah, tricky to rank that one. I don't know. Yeah, The Money Story is excellent. Yeah, I think I'll put it above. They're kind of going to be loosely ranked in the tiers. Don't really read too much in those. But yeah, The Money Story is excellent. Just an absolute wild ride of just insanity. Just some of the most wackiest lyrics you've ever heard. They don't feel like, it's abrasive, but it doesn't feel abrasive for the sake of being abrasive. It doesn't feel shocking for the sake of feeling shocking, which is something I have a huge issue with shocking music. You know, early Tyler Creator, where it's trying so hard to make you wince, but it ends up just being ugly and doesn't really have that effect. I love Tyler, by the way, but I'm just talking about his early music that just, I think, is pretty bad. Whereas Death Grips is just like, absolutely, like, on another level, and the music is so forward thinking, it's so wild and manic in a way that you just can't conceive. I don't know how anyone could make this. Yeah, fantastic stuff. Big fan of Death Grips. Again, I've also done a video on them too, so make sure you check that one out. A worst to best of their albums. Violator by Depeche Mode. I've always had a bit of an odd relationship with Depeche Mode. I find some of their songs to be absolutely like incredible all-timers. Enjoy the Silence, I just think, is an immaculate, perfect song. And yet the rest of the album just doesn't quite have that same sauce. Like, it's like they're cooking with a different sauce when they made with that song. And then they changed the sauce. Maybe it got too expensive. Or maybe the ingredients changed mid making the album or something. Because nothing really else on this album lives up to that song. Personal Jesus is good. But yeah, and Clean is very good too. A bit of an underrated track. But I just think it's alright. It's alright. It's cool. It's decent. Some solid synth stuff. I don't see how this is perfect at all, honestly. I think out of all the albums so far, I think it's the one album I struggle to see that being labelled as a perfect album. But yeah, respect to anyone that loves it. Maybe you can explain to me what in the comments what makes it so amazing, because I don't know if I quite get it. Frank Zappa, Hot Rats, I think is, yeah, fantastic. Another album really that I haven't talked about in this channel before, because I just find it to be so frantic and unique and oddball-y in a way that's hard to really describe, but I think it's great. Been a long time since I've had a chance to go back to this one, because I think just the length can be a bit tricky to sit through albums like this sometimes, but I was really impressed with this one. I had heard a few Godspeed albums before. I think some of their 90s stuff I wasn't really keen on, but this album really touched a spot that I was quite surprised by. Yeah, really, really cool stuff. Again, might be one that I need to go back to. We're going to have to mention Kate Bush though, because this is an all-timer right here. This is the first all-timer on the list. A first of a few all-timers that will pop up. But yeah, it seems like the obvious sort of female art pop album that everybody calls perfect. I feel like this and Vespertine live in the same world. Like they're literally like the only two female albums in like the top 100 on Rated Music. It might not be, there might be another one, but I'm pretty sure like they're basically the only female solo artists that pop up in the top 100 on that website, which just really adds to the stereotypes of the user base on there, which I don't like to really take the mick out of, but it is kind of funny when you think about it, because they just are two artists that are so obviously like easy to praise. But yeah, Kate Bush, just there are like 5 albums in her discography that would rank here, honestly. She just is that good. She's just incredible. The run of tracks on this album, the first leg, is insane. The second half of the album as well takes a different turn, but the music is so incredible. Like, who's making Waking the Witch in 1985? Who else could make that song? It's just absolutely weird as hell. Yeah, The Morning Fog, super underrated. Watching You Without Me, super underrated as well. Like, this album is just full of gems. Like, the amazing songs that everybody knows are amazing, but then the ones that people don't talk about are still pretty much as good as those as well. Yeah, it's an all-timer. Yeah, I mean, To Pimp a Butterfly, I'm not even going to lead this one with anything. It's just going straight into all-time. This is pretty much the best hip-hop album ever to me. Again, maybe an obvious thing to say, because I think it's become that kind of album now where everybody says that, but I'm not really bothered by being part of the general consensus. Sometimes it's just fine to be on the general consensus, really. What can I say? Just incredible. A really, at times, misunderstood album, because I feel as though everybody knows what this album is about and everybody knows how it achieves what it does so perfectly. But yeah, I still feel as though everyone just thinks it's this jazz rap album where Kendrick Lamar is talking about freeing the slaves and talking about politics, and it actually isn't that. And I know there are people that say that in an ignorant way, but I still see people who love the album speak about it in that kind of way too. But I actually think this album is more personal and reflective than people realize. It's not the same personal and reflective album that Mr. Morale is, but I think honestly this album actually does a lot more than people say it does, to be honest with you. It takes his own place in the world and uses that through that kind of lens and reflects on his place and his sort of influence and where he stands in the world of not just music, but in the world of being a person with a voice and how to use that voice, not really knowing always how. And speaking on mental health, it really is just an album that captures so much. And of course the poem by the end, where he's just kind of asking Tupac for advice because he feels as though he hasn't really got anyone to turn to or doesn't really know the answers to the questions he's trying to ask. And then, of course, those questions don't even get answered by the end. It is just really incredible. Kendrick Lamar is just a one-of-a-kind generational talent that we will never see. And when he says he is just Big Me, he's right. There is nobody operating on this level currently in this day and age of hip-hop. Like, yeah. Could speak about this album all day. What else can anyone say, honestly? Ooh, and that poem as well. That poem is so good. Again, everyone talks about this album, but I feel like nobody actually talks about how good that poem is at the end. Not the questions he asks Tupac, but the actual poem is really, really incredible. I get goosebumps every time that part comes on. Anyway, could talk about the album for days on end. We're going to go Kids See Ghosts. I like Kids See Ghosts, I do, but I can't bear to agree with people who put this so high up in Kanye's rankings. I just can't believe it. I think there's some really clever sampling techniques going on here. I think there's some really good lyrics on here as well. Again, talking about that personal side of things, they're both really hammering in some really beautiful emotions that they're tapping into on this album, but I just don't think every song is just that amazing, really. I find them to just be fine. I've never been the biggest fan of Kid Cudi's tone, so that can be a bit off-putting for me. But I think it's just a good album, and calling an album good is fine. We can call an album good. We can call an album good. It's okay. Miseducation, Lauryn Hill, another weirdly misunderstood album, actually. Because everyone calls it like the greatest rap album ever, and it's probably like 60% neo-soul and 40% rapping. It's a very odd reputation this album holds, but even still, it's very good. I actually find myself really taken aback by some of the songs on this album. I find some of the songs to be brilliant. You know, X Factor's great. Doo Wop is just an amazing track. One of my favourite 90s songs, period. But yeah, I'm not quite as head over heels for some of this album as some people are. I think it's beautifully crafted. I think musically it's stunning. I think Lauren is a great vocalist. But yeah, I don't know. Just never quite like absolutely been head over heels for it in the way that, you know, like it ranked at #1 on Apple Music's list. I'm not mad at that pick because I think it's a very good album. But yeah, it's not quite on that level for me personally. And just never really has been. I'm not sure why. Led Zeppelin's an interesting one to be talking about here because this is Fantano's perfect Led Zeppelin album. You tend to see Led Zeppelin 4, but he's gone with Physical Graffiti. And again, it's quite a long, sprawling, ambitious album that really takes on some new things that we hadn't seen them do prior to this album. And Led Zeppelin's a weird one for me because I think maybe living through that era might have helped me appreciate them more than I do now. Not to say that you have to live through an era to like music. I mean, look, Hot Rats, look how high up that is. And I obviously wasn't born when that album came out. But yeah, I just feel like I don't quite get what makes them so amazing. Whenever I listen to their albums, I just always finish a Led Zeppelin album and think, that was pretty good. Every time. I just don't, it never goes past that. It never drops below that either. I haven't heard a single Led Zeppelin album that I didn't like. But it never really goes beyond like these two tiers. And I'm not sure why. I don't know what it is that gives them that extra pizzazz that would put them higher up for me. But yeah, I can't explain my Led Zeppelin relationship. They're good. They're never bad. They're never even mediocre, but they're always just good. We've got Sinner Get Ready next. An album that I'm going to put in excellent, but I will say it's quite hard to sit through on a regular basis. I don't go back to this album at all, to be honest with you. Although I did put it on my year-end list and I did give it an 8 out of 10 review. So I stand by those things, but good God, it's a difficult one to sit through. Just that haunting, like, organ playing through each of the tracks that just really lingers in your brain. It's such a harrowing experience in a way that you will not experience anywhere else. But it is so fantastic when you are listening to it. Like, you cannot fault what Lingua Ignota is doing at all. The writing is so blunt as well. It's an amazing album, but God, I could probably go 5 years without hearing it and I'd be okay because it just is quite difficult to get through. Mad Villainy, all-timer. Is it above Hands of Love? It doesn't really matter. I'd probably say no, but it doesn't really matter. Yeah, again, with Kendrick Lamar here, we're talking about an album that just has such an incredible reputation that speaking on it really... It just feels like you're repeating what everyone said. It's just fantastic. Doom's quirkiness I find to be so enjoyable. The beats from Madlib are just next level. Some of those beats are crazy. Yeah, just the way it all feels kind of like short and snappy to the point and you're just on to the next idea. But it moves along with such a nice pace. Oh, so good. Yeah. I'm not really going to repeat myself because everyone said this anyway. Quite a nice run of albums here, because Marvin Gaye, I might put there. I think that's definitely not in question, whether it's above Kate Bush's Hands of Love for me, because What's Going On is just that good. And an album that actually I used to probably have further down, maybe somewhere in this tier, but I don't know what I was smoking, because every time I play this album now, and I've played it quite a lot this year, I just keep wanting to go back to it. I'm just so blown away by it. The writing, the vocals, the musicianship, the way the tracks just segue nicely into one another, the way that Marvin Gaye has no answers to any freaking question, and he's clueless as hell, and he's always asking what's going on. He just doesn't have anything. What's happening, brother? He doesn't have a clue. But it is just so pertinent and still feels relevant in so many ways, even to this day. But yeah, it's just brilliant, and I just love the flow of it, the feeling you get listening to the instrumentals. It's so stunning. One of the best albums ever made for me personally. I cannot fault this one being considered perfect. I maybe could have had a perfect tier actually, and maybe done that, but even still, all-timer, I just kind of wanted to capture the best of the best that are my opinion, the best of the best. Metallica, I haven't really got any hot takes on Metallica. I just think they're as good as everyone says. Probably put it there. Maybe ahead of Brat actually. It doesn't really matter, but yeah, I haven't got any hot takes here. Metallica are just great. I even like the Black Album, which is one people seem to think isn't that good. I think the Black Album's great as well. Ride the Lightning. Look, to me, they're just fantastic. They really are the very best of that era of metal music. The debate is pretty much settled for me. I don't really think there's much of an argument between, Megadeth, whatnot. I just think they're the best out of that era. Yeah, fantastic. Bitches Brew. Again, quite a long, sprawling album that I haven't really had huge amounts of opportunities to sit through, but I will say it is very good whenever I listen to it. Miles Davis is just truly one of a kind. Again, it's got that element of being quite sprawling and quite frantic in places and being quite heady and a bit difficult to kind of latch onto, which again, I was saying earlier, similarly with Mingus, where that kind of jazz isn't as doesn't resonate with me as much as maybe other forms of jazz, but I still appreciate what he's doing on there. Nina Simone, not my favourite Nina album, so I'm a bit surprised that this is considered the perfect one, but even still, that being said, it's a very good album, and you can't go wrong with Nina Simone. I don't think there's ever going to be a Nina Simone album that drops below very good, really. Like, there's just no way. There's just no way Nina Simone ever dropped that low. She is just hitting highs with every single release. She is truly one of the best vocalists to ever do it. Ever do it. And when you see all-time vocalist lists, and she doesn't even rank in the top 20. I can't remember which list it was. I saw one not that long ago, and she wasn't even in the top 20. I just have to go, what are you doing? She is top 20. And with an incredible reputation that comes before it, maybe because of how iconic the album cover is and iconic they were at the time, we've got Nirvana's Nevermind. Truly great. I think I might slightly prefer In Utero, but honestly, it doesn't really matter. I think it's top of the excellence. It's an obvious album that everyone praises, but I don't really have anything bad to say. I think it's fantastic. I think the variation of tracks as well, like Something in the Way, Territorial Pissings, and Come As You Are, all being on one album, but all being excellent tracks in their own right, just really goes to show how Kurt Cobain and the rest of the gang, like, really truly utilized all of their influences. Like, that list of Kurt Cobain's favorite albums that tends to go viral every now and then really perfectly captures what Nirvana were doing. Because all of the influences that are listed, I can't even remember all of them, but I think it's like Dinosaur Jr. and Big Black and Pixies, and there's a bunch of others. Like, all of that is basically fused together, and that's how you get Nirvana. Like, they really utilized everything that they loved about music and just put it into their own work and made something so special, really. And In Utero, again, is a similar one, where they just nailed it. And that one's a bit of a darker album. That one's a bit more sinister at times, but it's just as good. Again, maybe even slightly better. But yeah, I can't really argue with Nevermind being a perfect album. It is just fantastic. This is one I don't go back to as much now, but when I first heard it, and even when I do go back to it, it is really quite a special album. Neutral Milk Hotel with In the Airplane Over the Sea, which is a bit of a meme and became a bit of like a 4chan sort of Mew album or whatever, but I think it garnering such a great reputation as the times went by is quite a cool thing, and I think it deserves it too. I think vocally, it's just a really odd album. Like, some of the tones Jeff hits are just like kind of wrong, but it all just works, and instrumentally I think it's really cool. I think the writing is really interesting as well. Purple Rain, I'm just going to hit you with a bunch of excellence now, aren't I? Because Purple Rain is just brilliant. Again, maybe up here. Again, an album that you see on every all-time list ever, and you can never get mad at it, because why would you? Purple Rain is just truly fantastic. I think maybe Computer Blue is a bit of a weak point on the album, and I think it was kind of, experimental for its time, but the way technology has progressed hasn't aged the best. But that's kind of a similar thing we have with some of these albums I mentioned already, where contextually at the time, if you'd heard that for the very first time, you'd have probably been, oh my God. But now things changed. And again, I wasn't born in the 80s, so I couldn't know what it sounded like back then. I'm only going off my opinion now. But yeah, truly some amazing tracks. I mean, oh my God, When Doves Cry. Yeah, just, what's that other track? I don't care. Take Me With You. Where they go, I don't care what we do. I don't care, pretty baby. Just take me with you. Yeah, that's such a good track. That's a jam right there. Purple Rain, the title track. Ooh. Wow, some amazing songs. We've got Public Enemy next, which again, I think, of its time, I think it might be like the best rap album, really, because I think some of that 80s stuff hasn't aged the best. But actually, Public Enemy, I still think some of the things they were saying, some of the production elements still sound quite good today. Because I do think as maybe as ignorant as it might sound, I don't think much 80s rap music has really stood the test of time, to be honest. But yeah, I do think it's still very good. And I think, the writing and the lyrics, the sharpness of it as well. You can clearly see where like Run the Jewels would get their influence from, or maybe just Killer Mike solo or LP solo. That punchiness, that straight to the point, that kind of directness really comes from this sort of style of rap. Ice Cube as well had that element to him, with NWA. I feel like that kind of modern day equivalent of rappers being like that would 100% be listening to albums like this when they were younger and taking that and kind of putting it into their own music. So again, an incredibly influential album. For me, Joe, I just wouldn't call it perfect. But again, I don't think I'd call any 80s hip-hop album perfect, to be honest with you. As a hot take, that is, I don't know. The Turning Wheel spelling. I think out of all of Fantano's Channel 10s, like his Channel 10 out of 10s, not these albums, but out of those 10 out of 10s, I think this is definitely the outlier. I don't quite fully get from Fantano's perspective how he would call this perfect. It doesn't seem like an album that he's really would usually call perfect. When you look at his 10 out of 10s, there's kind of a through line. They're kind of bold, they're kind of brash, they're unashamedly unique. They do something that maybe you wouldn't hear anywhere else. And it kind of makes sense, but I think this one's quite an outlier because it's a very lovely album. But I don't think The Turning Wheel does anything that we haven't heard in art pop before, really. But again, I'm not hating on it. I would definitely put it up here. Probably, in fact, I'd probably put it a bit lower. Yeah, I'd probably put it a bit higher than some of the ones there. But yeah, it's very good. It's very lovely, Little Dear, the title track as well. There's some stunning moments, but yeah, I just think from his perspective, it was a bit of a surprise to see him do this one as a 10. Swans I have a bit of a weird relationship with. I can't really fathom if I like them all the time or not, because this album has some incredible songs on it, but I am not listening to this for 2 hours. I'm just not doing it. And this is the thing, it's not me hating on long albums, because trust me, friggin' James Holden, amazing artist who has that whole DJ mix that goes on for like 2 hours something. DJ Sabrina is another one as well. Stevie Wonder, that Fisherman's Live album. Like, I could go on and on and on with long albums. I just realised I nearly said I could go on with lies then. That nearly came out that way. I wasn't going to lie to you. I'm not going to lie to you. But yeah, I just think Swans get a bit much. They're just a bit much. They're that one person that's just in your face, just being a bit chatty, chewing your ear off when you just kind of want to chill. They're just a bit much, aren't they? It's cool. Oxygen is like incredible. Oxygen is insanely good. That song I could listen to over and over again. That song is just ridiculous. But yeah, for a full album, I just don't know. It just gets a bit much. It just gets a bit much. Toxicity, System of a Down, I feel as though is a cool one to have as a perfect album, actually. Because I think of this era, there are lots of bands that haven't aged the best. You've got your Papa Roach, you've got your Korn, you've got all of that kind of like Disturbed crap as well. And this is kind of branched in with all of that because it kind of got listed as new metal and was basically a staple on Kerrang, where you'd get this playing straight after My Chemical Romance or something like that. But it actually just isn't anything like anything else ever. Like, it gets bunched together with a lot of things, but it truly is just one of a kind. I mean, this and Mesmerize are truly two of the most unique albums I think you'll ever hear in your life. Mesmerize particularly, I think, is more wild and weird than this one, actually. I think some of the lyrics and some of the writing on that album is just ridiculously weird and hilarious too. But yeah, I System of a Down are something else. They really aren't anything like you'll ever hear. But I like it a lot. I do. I really do. I think it's going to go high up here. Do I love it? No. And I think sometimes by the end of the album, some of the ideas kind of get hammered in. Similar to what I was saying with Daft Punk. Like, I think they run with one thing and do that kind of weird vocal thing. They do that kind of weird lyrical thing. And then they kind of just hammer it in for the rest of the song. But yeah, tracks like Prison Song, all of the singles are just insanely good. You know, Aerials, Toxicity, Chop Suey, some of the best songs of the 2000s, easily. But yeah, I'm not absolutely head over heels for it as an entire album. Okay, last run of 5 albums now. Let's just get all these bashed in and call it there, because we have Talking Heads next, Remain in Light, which I think is an album of two halves. It's a tale of two halves for me personally. I think the first side is fantastic, and I think side B is good, but I just don't find myself latching onto those songs. And you could tell that the vinyl era of making music is just massively influential on these albums from this time period, because you can so clearly tell the difference between side A and side B. And you can actually also tell when we get to Abbey Road as well that there's a clear stopping point when you would flip over the vinyl to hear then a totally new batch of songs. And I think Talking Heads Remain Light kind of captures that brilliantly, really. And yeah, I just think it's very good. I just don't find myself, absolutely loving every song on that album, unfortunately. But yeah, Jesus Christ, Once in a Lifetime, Born in Punches, it's fantastic. And they're clearly pulling from some of the tracks some kind of like African influence with the rhythms and stuff. So it is very much, them kind of paying homage to that culture. But they do it well. It's done tastefully. And yeah, I think it's a very good album. Television. This is an album that I don't talk about very often, and maybe surprising to some people who watch me that think I don't really like rock music, but I think Marquee Moon is perfect. I actually really do think the album's just incredible, to be honest with you. I think the vocal timbre and the tones and the way the tracks kind of go in these odd directions, I think is really cool, while also maintaining an accessibility. I think is really impressive. The title track is one of the best long songs ever as well. Yeah, I absolutely love that album, and I probably should talk about it more on this channel too, because I think of its era, of its time, it's just really bizarre. It's bizarre to me that they were doing this so early on, when you look at like the 80s and there were so many more bands that came through that started to sound like this as well. Yeah, really amazing stuff. Again, not really got any hot takes here with Abbey Road. I'd maybe put it there. Yeah, Abbey Road is absolutely amazing. As I said with this album too, there's just so many different dynamics to what they were doing that you could tell that at the time, the creation of a vinyl having side A, B, C, D was really influential in how they structured this album, because it's really funny to see the different transitions from track to track. But yeah, amazing stuff. What can I really say? I've spoken about the Beatles on this channel already with my Beatles top 10 songs, so you know how much I like them. They're as good as everyone says to me. I don't really buy into the fact that they're overrated, because I just think an album like this does things that we haven't really ever quite imagined in music. Tracks like Octopus's Garden and stuff like that, it's just so weird and off kilter, but the amazing songs are just, incredible, like Oh Darling, Something, the Carry That Way. Yeah, there's not much else to say. It's in that kind of group of albums where you're just repeating what everyone else has already said. But yeah, The Clash, London Calling, the only white boys that are allowed to do a bit of reggae. The only white boys I'm allowing to do a bit of reggae. Is that okay? It's okay. Yeah, I think this is a very good album. I think some of the detours that the album takes into some of the different sort of sounds and the sort of new wave punky stuff, I think is really impressive. Maybe runs a little long, maybe wouldn't have it as quite as long as it is, but I think it's really good. I think their debut is actually really good too, which isn't talked about as much as this one. But yeah, I do really like that one too. So yeah, The Clash are just a very good band. That, again, can't really say a lot about that hasn't already been said. Maybe just don't quite love them as much as other people do, because again, a lot of people would have this in all-timer for sure, but for me personally, I just wouldn't say I would. And then we're going to finish off really strongly with the Wu-Tang Clan, which I think I'm going to put right at the top of excellent. Truly one of the best rap albums of all time. It has a reputation and lives up to it perfectly. All of the different styles of rapping that you get on this one album, because of how varied they are as different voices and personalities within the group, I think is something to behold, because it really shouldn't work as well as it does. But it really does. Like, they're all just bringing their own style to the table while also rapping over like the same beat. It's really cool. I find some of the sort of like comic book vibes, similarly to Mad Villainy, that the album goes for, like kind of like villainous sort of like old sort of like noir film feel to some of the tracks is really cool as well. Yeah, I absolutely love what they do on this album. No hot takes here, although I guess I've thrown out a few hot takes in this tier list. But for me personally, I think that album is as good as everyone says. And that's the tier list complete. As you can see, as I did say at the start, I didn't think there'd be any that dropped below into the lower tiers. But yeah, it turns out that that ended up being true. We have a nicely put together tier list here. Maybe more positive than you might have expected, but I am quite happy with that. And let me know how you'd rank it as well in the comments, because you can make your own tier list and send me it on wherever you follow me. All right, that's it for today then. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. I have enjoyed ranking these albums and talking about them with you guys. Let me know your thoughts on any of my opinions in the comments, if you agree with them, disagree with them. Hopefully I've gone into enough detail without keeping this video going on forever and ever and ever, because that's always a problem with these types of videos. But let me know in the comments as well what you think and what I should do next, what should be my next tier list, what other videos should I be doing. Let me know. Have a good day. Check out my Patreon. I'm feeling really generous, but at the very least, you've got to subscribe and stick around for more content as well. Have a good day and goodbye.